It started on a Friday evening in Denver. I was in my home gym, finishing up my workout, when I heard my girlfriend Jessica's laptop ping with a notification from across the living room. She was in the shower, and normally I wouldn't even glance at her personal stuff, but the laptop was open on the coffee table, and the message preview was visible from where I stood. The notification was from her sister Amanda. Any progress on getting him to invest in Dad's restaurant? I froze mid-rep. What restaurant? Jessica's dad worked in insurance. I'd never heard anything about a restaurant. Then another message popped up, this one from Jessica herself. Apparently she was texting from her phone while in the shower. Not yet. He's being careful with his money lately. But don't worry, I'll convince him this weekend. Once he puts in the $200K, we split it 3 ways like we planned. He'll never see a dime back. I just stood there holding the dumbbells, staring at the screen. The words felt surreal, like I was reading someone else's nightmare. I'm a software engineer who sold my startup 2 years ago. I've worked 80-hour weeks since I was 22 to build something from nothing. And the woman I'd been dating for 8 months, the woman I was falling in love with, was planning to steal $200,000 from me. My first instinct was to march into the bathroom and confront her immediately. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the programmer in me. I don't deploy code without testing it thoroughly first. I needed to see the full scope of this bug before I could fix it. I quietly walked over to her laptop. She hadn't logged out of her messages. I took screenshots of everything on my phone, then started scrolling up through the conversation history. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. The restaurant investment was completely fabricated. There was no restaurant. Jessica, her sister Amanda, and their father Robert had been planning this con for months. They'd researched me thoroughly. My LinkedIn, my company sale, even my social media posts about financial planning. They knew exactly how much I was worth. The messages laid out their entire strategy. Jessica was supposed to get close to me, build trust, then present this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to invest in her father's new upscale restaurant concept. They'd even created fake business plans, incorporation documents, and financial projections. Her sister worked at a marketing firm and had professional contacts who could make it all look legitimate. But the part that really got me was a message from 3 weeks ago. Right after I'd told Jessica I was thinking about buying a house and maybe settling down. Her response to her family: perfect timing. He's getting sentimental. I'll start talking about our future together. Maybe hint that I want kids someday. Men are so predictable when they think they're in love. Her sister's reply: remember, once you get the money, you need to stay with him for at least 6 months. If you break up too soon after the investment, he might get suspicious and investigate. Play the loving girlfriend, then gradually become distant. Make it seem like a natural relationship breakdown. And their father's contribution: this is our retirement fund, girls. $200,000 split 3 ways, plus whatever interest we can earn before we have to disappear. Jessica, you're doing great. He trusts you completely. The more I scrolled, the more sickening it became. They had detailed notes about my habits, my friends, my family. Jessica had been documenting everything about me like I was some kind of research project. They knew I was close to my parents, that I valued honesty above everything else, that I'd been hurt before by a cheating ex-girlfriend. They were using my vulnerabilities against me. There was even a conversation about how Jessica should respond if I ever got suspicious. Play hurt, Amanda had advised. Act like you can't believe he would doubt you. Make him feel guilty for not trusting you. Gaslight him into thinking he's being paranoid. I screenshot every single message, uploaded them to a secure cloud folder, and then closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it. Jessica emerged from the bathroom in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel, looking absolutely radiant. "Hey, babe," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "Good workout?" "Yeah, great," I managed to say. My voice sounded normal, but inside, I felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. "I was thinking," she continued, settling next to me on the couch, "maybe we could have dinner with my dad tomorrow night? He's been wanting to talk to you about something exciting." "Sure," I said. "What about?" She gave me this conspiratorial smile. "It's a surprise, but I think you're going to love it. It could be really good for us, for our future." I nodded and smiled back, but all I could think was, you have no idea what's coming. The rest of that evening was torturous. Jessica was being extra affectionate, cuddling up to me during our Netflix binge, talking about random future plans like we were going to grow old together. Every touch felt like manipulation. Every "I love you" sounded like a lie. Because now I knew it was all a lie. I excused myself early, claiming I had a headache. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. How long had she been planning this? Was any of it real? The way she laughed at my jokes, the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, the tears she cried when I told her about my grandmother's death, was it all an act? I thought about all the times she'd steered conversations toward my finances. I'd thought she was just interested in my work, my success. Now I realized she was gathering intelligence. Every question about my investment portfolio, every comment about my lifestyle, every observation about my spending habits, it was all data collection for the con. Update 1. The next 3 weeks were the most bizarre of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while watching Jessica execute her plan step by step. It was like being in a psychological thriller where I was both the target and the only person who knew the real plot. First came dinner with her father. Robert was a smooth talker, I'll give him that. He painted this picture of an upscale farm-to-table restaurant concept in downtown Denver's hottest neighborhood. He had professional-looking business plans, market research, even architectural renderings of the space. I've been in insurance for 20 years, he told me over expensive steaks at Morton's, but I've always dreamed of the restaurant business. My late father owned a diner back in Nebraska, and I grew up around food service. Now, I finally have the capital and the opportunity to make it happen. The story was compelling and detailed. He talked about his father's work ethic, how he'd learned the value of hospitality from watching the old man serve coffee to farmers at 5 a.m. every morning for 30 years. He showed me photos of the original diner, told stories about working there as a teenager, explained how the restaurant business had changed, but how good food and service were still the foundation of success. Jessica played her part perfectly, squeezing my hand and talking about how proud she was of her dad for following his dreams. "Wouldn't it be amazing to be part of something like this from the ground up?" she said, her eyes shining with what I now knew was fake enthusiasm. I asked all the right questions. What's the timeline? Who's the contractor? Where's the location exactly? What's the competitive landscape like? Robert had answers for everything. The attention to detail was impressive. They'd clearly put a lot of work into this fiction. He showed me market analysis data for the Lodo district, demographic breakdowns of potential customers, even traffic pattern studies for the supposed location on 17th Street. The lease was supposedly being negotiated with a property management company I'd actually heard of. The contractor was a firm that had built several successful restaurants in the area. "The thing is," Robert said as dessert arrived, "I'm still looking for one more investor, someone who understands business, who can bring not just capital but expertise. Someone like you, David." There it was, the hook. "I'm flattered," I said, "but I'd need to see all the financials, do my due diligence." "Of course," Robert said. "I wouldn't expect anything less from a successful entrepreneur like yourself. In fact, I'd be worried if you didn't ask those questions." He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I've had other potential investors who are ready to write checks on the spot. But I want partners who think like business owners, not just people with money." It was a masterful performance. He was making me feel special, chosen, while simultaneously creating a sense of scarcity and competition. These people were professionals. Over the following weeks, Jessica ramped up the pressure in subtle ways. She started talking about our future constantly, how she wanted us to be real partners in life, to build something together. She even mentioned wanting kids, something she'd never brought up before. "I love how ambitious you are," she told me one night as we were watching Netflix. "I want to be ambitious too. I want to contribute to our life, not just be along for the ride. Maybe Dad's restaurant could be a way for me to learn about business, to be more of an equal partner with you." She started leaving real estate brochures around the apartment. Houses in nice neighborhoods with price tags that would require serious dual income to afford. She'd point out couples we knew who were building something together through shared business ventures or investments. Meanwhile, Robert kept sending me documents, financial projections showing massive returns in the Denver restaurant market, letters of intent from fake suppliers, organic farms in Boulder, craft breweries in Fort Collins, artisanal cheesemakers in Steamboat Springs, even a lease agreement for a prime restaurant space downtown on 17th Street, complete with architectural plans and permit applications. I had my lawyer friend Mike look at everything. It was all completely fabricated, but professionally done. The letterheads looked legitimate, the financial models were sophisticated, even the legal documents had the right language and formatting. "This is elaborate," Mike told me over lunch at our usual spot near his law firm. "Whoever put this together knows what they're doing. The incorporation documents alone would have cost thousands to fake this well. If you didn't have those text messages, you might actually consider it." That was the scariest part. Without knowing it was a scam, I might have fallen for it. The documents looked legitimate, the business plan was solid, and I trusted Jessica completely. Robert's insurance background gave him credibility, and his knowledge of business terminology and legal processes was impressive. It was the perfect crime, but I wasn't going to be the perfect victim. During this time, I started doing my own research. I looked up the property management company Robert claimed to be negotiating with. They were real, but when I called them anonymously asking about restaurant spaces, they had no 17th Street properties available. The contractor he mentioned was legitimate too, but their receptionist told me they were booked solid for the next 18 months. I cross-referenced the suppliers mentioned in his business plan. Some were real companies that had never heard of Robert Richardson. Others were complete fabrications with fake websites that had been registered just weeks earlier. The deeper I dug, the more impressed I became with the scope of their operation. This wasn't some amateur hour con. They'd created an entire fictional business ecosystem, complete with fake suppliers, made-up competitors, and fabricated market research data. I also started paying closer attention to Jessica's behavior. Now that I knew what to look for, the manipulation was obvious. She'd bring up money conversations at specific times, usually when I was relaxed and happy, maybe after we'd had a good day together or after sex. She'd mention seeing other couples our age getting ahead through smart investments. She'd talk about feeling insecure about our financial disparity and wanting to contribute more to our relationship. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated too. She never directly asked for money or pushed too hard on any one occasion. Instead, she'd plant seeds, make observations, ask leading questions. She'd mention seeing a young couple at the coffee shop who were so smart for starting a business together. She'd point out news articles about successful restaurant chains that started with small investments. She'd casually bring up her dad's progress on the restaurant planning and how excited she was about our family's future. One night, she even staged what I now realize was a completely fake emotional breakdown. She started crying during dinner, talking about how she felt like she wasn't contributing enough to our relationship, how she wanted to be a real partner but didn't know how. "I make $35,000 a year at the gallery," she sobbed. "You're this successful entrepreneur, and I'm just nobody. I want to build something with you, but what do I have to offer?" At the time, I'd comforted her, told her she was worth more than money, that I loved her for who she was. Now I knew it was all theater designed to make me feel guilty about our income disparity and prime me to see the restaurant investment as a way for her to contribute to our future. I started planning my counterattack. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. Update 2. My plan was simple. Let them think they were winning right up until the moment I destroyed them completely. I told Jessica I was seriously interested in investing. Her excitement was Oscar-worthy. She literally jumped up and down and started crying happy tears about how this would change all our lives. She immediately called her dad, then her sister, sharing the good news. "I want to do this right." I told Robert when he came over the next day with final paperwork. "This isn't just an investment for me. It's about becoming part of your family. I want to make this official with a proper celebration." Robert's eyes lit up. "What do you have in mind?" "A dinner party," I said. "Your whole family, some of my closest friends, maybe even my business attorney. I want everyone to witness this moment. Let's make it an event." Jessica was practically glowing. "That's so romantic," she said. "You're making this about more than just money. You're making it about family." If only she knew. The next few days were interesting. I could see the family's group text chain lighting up constantly. Jessica was trying to hide her excitement, but she kept breaking into spontaneous smiles. Amanda called to congratulate us and welcome me to the family, a nice touch that made me want to vomit. Even Patricia, Jessica's mom, sent me a sweet text about how proud she was to have me as a future son-in-law. Future son-in-law. They were already spending my money in their minds. I booked a private dining room at the Capitol Grill, the most expensive restaurant in Denver, for the following Saturday night. I invited Robert, Patricia, Jessica, Amanda, and her husband Chris, plus 3 of my closest friends. Mike the lawyer, Sarah, who's a financial investigator for a major bank, and Tom, who runs a cybersecurity firm. "Why so many people?" Jessica asked when I told her the guest list. "Because this is a big moment," I said. "I'm not just investing money. I'm investing in our future together. I want the people who matter most to both of us to be there." What I didn't tell her was that Mike, Sarah, and Tom all knew exactly what was really happening. They were going to be my witnesses, and if needed, my backup. I'd briefed them all on the situation. Mike had reviewed all the fake documents and confirmed they were fraudulent. Sarah had run background checks on the entire Richardson family and found some interesting inconsistencies in their financial history. Tom had traced the fake supplier websites and confirmed they were all registered to shell companies that led back to Robert. "This is going to be brutal," Mike had warned me. "Are you sure you want to do it this publicly?" "They plan to humiliate me financially and emotionally," I replied. "They deserve the same treatment." The week before the dinner, I played my part perfectly. I was affectionate, excited, talking about how this investment would be the foundation for our life together. Jessica ate it up. Her texts to her family were triumphant. "He's completely hooked. This is going to be easier than we thought." I even went so far as to have a fake cashier's check made. Not a real one, obviously, but something that looked official enough to fool them temporarily. I wanted them to taste victory before I yanked it away. Meanwhile, I was preparing for the real show. I'd created a presentation with all the screenshots I'd taken, organized chronologically to tell the story of their con. I'd also prepared backup evidence. The fake supplier websites, the non-existent lease, even phone records showing calls between the family members at suspicious times. Jessica spent hours getting ready for the dinner, trying on different outfits, doing her hair and makeup like she was going to the Oscars. She kept talking about how this was the beginning of our real life together, how proud she was that I wanted to include both our families in this moment. "I love that you're thinking of this as joining families," she said as we got dressed. "It shows me what kind of husband and father you'll be someday." The manipulation never stopped, even when she thought she'd already won. The dinner. Saturday night arrived. The private dining room at the Capitol Grill was perfect, elegant, intimate, with a large screen I'd arranged for presenting the investment documents. Everyone arrived right on time. Jessica's family was dressed to the nines. Robert wore his most expensive suit and kept shaking hands with everyone like he was already a successful restaurateur. Patricia wore a dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, and she kept touching her pearl necklace nervously, though at the time I thought it was excitement, not anxiety. Amanda couldn't stop grinning and kept whispering to her husband Chris, who looked like he felt awkward about the whole situation. My friends played their parts too. Mike brought an official-looking briefcase and wore his best courtroom suit. Sarah had her laptop ready to review the final numbers and looked every inch the financial professional. Tom looked appropriately serious and businesslike, occasionally checking his phone like he was handling important cybersecurity matters. The conversation during cocktails was surreal. Robert regaled everyone with stories about his restaurant dreams, painting vivid pictures of the opening night, the reviews he hoped to get, the celebrity chefs who might visit. He had it all planned out, the grand opening party, the media coverage, even the expansion plans for additional locations. Jessica kept squeezing my hand under the table and whispering things like, "Can you believe this is really happening?" And "We're really doing this together." Amanda was asking Sarah about the technical aspects of large financial transactions, trying to sound knowledgeable about business while clearly fishing for information about how the money transfer would work. Even Chris seemed to be getting into it, asking Tom about cybersecurity for restaurant point-of-sale systems. A nice touch that showed they'd all been coached on what to discuss. We made small talk through appetizers and the main course. Everyone seemed relaxed and happy. The champagne was flowing, and toasts were being made to new beginnings and family partnerships. Patricia kept dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, talking about how proud she was of Robert for following his dreams and how grateful she was that Jessica had found such a generous, successful man. "You're going to make such beautiful babies," she told us, which made Jessica beam and squeeze my hand tighter. Finally, after dessert was cleared, I stood up. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began. "This is a special moment, not just for Robert's restaurant, but for Jessica and me as a couple. Tonight, I'm making an investment in our future." Jessica was beaming. Robert nodded approvingly, his chest puffed out with pride. Patricia wiped away what I assume were fake tears. Amanda was practically bouncing in her seat. "Before I write this check," I continued, pulling out the envelope containing the fake cashier's check, "I want everyone to understand exactly what kind of business we're getting into." I walked over to the screen and connected my laptop. Robert has presented me with what appears to be a fantastic opportunity, but as someone who's been in business for over a decade, I've learned to always verify everything. The room was silent. Everyone's attention focused on the screen. Jessica was still smiling, expecting to see business projections, or maybe photos of the restaurant location. Instead, I clicked to the first slide. It was a screenshot of Jessica's text messages to her sister. "Once he puts in the 200K, we split it 3 ways like we planned. He'll never see a dime back." The silence in that room was deafening. It was like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the space. Jessica's face went from radiant joy to absolute bone-white horror in a split second. Her mouth literally fell open, and I could see her trying to process what she was looking at. Robert actually choked on his wine and started coughing violently. Patricia's hand flew to her throat, and she made this little gasping sound. Amanda looked like she was going to be sick, her face turning green as the blood drained from it. "What is this?" Robert stammered when he finally stopped coughing. "David, I don't understand. This," I said, clicking to the next slide showing more of their text conversations, "is the real business plan." I methodically went through every screenshot I'd taken, their months of planning, the fake documents, the detailed timeline for how Jessica was supposed to manipulate me, the discussions about how to research my financial situation, even their conversations about what to do after they got the money, how Jessica should gradually become distant, how they'd make the relationship breakdown look natural, how they'd split the profits. My friends weren't surprised, of course, but they played their reactions perfectly. Mike was shaking his head in disgust, occasionally making notes in his legal pad. Sarah was taking screenshots of my presentation on her laptop. Tom was recording everything on his phone. "I have to admit," I said, looking directly at Robert, "this is impressive work. The fake business plan, the fabricated documents, the fictional suppliers, even the emotional manipulation timeline, it's all very professional. I clicked to a slide showing the fake supplier websites. These companies don't exist. The websites were registered 2 weeks after Jessica and I started dating. Another slide showed the property records. This lease is completely fabricated. The property management company has never heard of you. Another slide showed the incorporation documents. This LLC was never actually filed. The business license number belongs to a plumbing company in Pueblo. Jessica finally found her voice. David, no, this isn't. I can explain. Explain what? I cut her off. Explain how you researched my finances before our first date. Explain how you've been documenting my habits and vulnerabilities like I'm some kind of research project. Explain how you plan to steal my money and then gradually break up with me so I wouldn't suspect anything. She started crying, but they weren't the manipulative tears she'd used before. These were tears of pure panic and humiliation. The restaurant isn't real, I announced to the room. There's no lease, no investors, no business plan. It's all fake. What is real is conspiracy to commit fraud. That's when Mike stood up. David asked me to be here tonight in my capacity as his attorney. I've reviewed all the evidence he's gathered over the past several weeks, and I can confirm that what we're looking at constitutes wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft by deception. Tom jumped in next. I run a cybersecurity firm, and I've helped David trace all the digital evidence. We have logged conversations going back months, including deleted messages that were recovered from cloud backups. We also have IP address logs showing that all the fake supplier websites were created from Robert's home computer. Sarah was the final blow. I'm a financial crimes investigator for First National Bank. I've already begun preliminary reports that will be filed with both state and federal authorities on Monday morning. I should also mention that this type of organized fraud across family members typically carries federal charges with mandatory minimum sentences. Robert looked like he was having a heart attack. His face was red, and he was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Now wait just a minute, he said, his smooth facade completely gone. This is all a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I said, was yours. You thought I was an easy mark. You thought my success made me naive. You thought you could manipulate me into falling in love with a fake person and then steal my money. You were wrong on all counts. I looked around the table at Jessica's family. You're probably wondering what happens next. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this restaurant and never contact me again. You're going to abandon whatever other cons you're running. And you're going to hope that I don't decide to press charges. Patricia finally spoke up, her voice shaky. Please, this is just a misunderstanding. Jessica really does love you. Nothing about Jessica is real, I said coldly. She's a professional liar and a thief. The only thing I regret is wasting 8 months of my life on someone who sees me as nothing more than a paycheck. Jessica was sobbing now, mascara running down her face. David, please. I know this looks bad, but some of it became real. I do love you. My feelings changed. Please don't do this to us. There is no us, I replied. There never was. You're an actress playing a role and your performance ends tonight. I handed Robert a business card. This is the contact information for a criminal defense attorney. You're going to need one. Then I turned to my friends. Gentlemen, Sarah, I think we're done here. As we started to leave, Amanda finally spoke up. You can't prove we actually took any money, she said desperately. This was just talk, just fantasy. We never actually did anything illegal. Mike turned back to address her. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a crime whether the fraud is completed or not. Planning to steal someone's money is illegal. Creating fake business documents is illegal. Using wire communications to further a fraudulent scheme is illegal. You've committed about 6 different felonies just in the planning stages. We walked out of that restaurant, leaving them sitting in complete ruin. Jessica was still sobbing, her perfect makeup destroyed. Robert was frantically whispering to Patricia, who looked like she was in shock. Amanda was staring at her phone, like she was trying to figure out how to disappear. Chris just sat there, looking mortified, probably realizing his wife had dragged him into a felony conspiracy. As we reached the parking lot, my phone started buzzing with calls from Jessica's number. I rejected every single one. The immediate aftermath. The next 48 hours were absolute chaos, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Jessica tried everything. She showed up at my house Sunday morning, begging and pleading. I watched her through the security camera as she rang the doorbell for 20 minutes, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming, sometimes just standing there looking lost. I didn't open the door. She called from different numbers throughout the day. Her mom's phone, Amanda's phone, numbers I didn't recognize that were probably borrowed from friends or coworkers. I blocked them all. By Sunday evening, the emails started coming. Long, rambling messages about how this was all a misunderstanding, how her father had pressured her into it, how her feelings for me were real, even if the situation was fake. She swore she was going to pay me back somehow, that she would make it right, that she'd do anything to fix this. I forwarded them all to Mike without reading them completely. Her sister Amanda tried a different approach, sending me a message through LinkedIn, of all places. It was a long sob story about how the whole thing was Robert's idea and how Jessica was just a victim of his manipulation. According to Amanda, Robert had been financially controlling their family for years, and this scam was his idea to secure his retirement. Jessica had gone along with it reluctantly and had tried to back out several times. It was a nice try, but I'd seen the text messages. Jessica had been an enthusiastic participant, not a reluctant victim. But the most interesting development came from an unexpected source. Patricia, Jessica's mother. She called me Tuesday evening from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "David," she said, her voice shaky and exhausted, "I need to tell you something. I need you to know that I had no idea what Robert and the girls were planning." "I find that hard to believe," I said. I know it looks bad, but I swear to you, I thought Robert really was starting a restaurant. I thought Jessica really loved you. When you showed those messages on Saturday night, it was the first time I learned the truth." She was crying now. "I've been married to Robert for 22 years, and I'm finding out I don't know him at all. Our marriage is over. I'm filing for divorce, and I want to help you." "Help me how?" "I have access to Robert's computer, his files, his bank accounts. This isn't their first time doing something like this. There are other victims, David. Other people they've scammed over the years." That got my attention. "What kind of other victims?" "Robert's been running investment cons for at least 5 years, maybe longer. The restaurant thing is just the latest version. Before that, it was a tech startup scam. Before that, it was real estate development. He targets successful single men, uses Jessica as bait, then disappears with their money." My blood ran cold. "How many others?" "At least 6 that I know of, maybe more. Some of them lost everything, their savings, their retirement funds, even their homes. There's one man who, David, I think one of them might have killed himself after Robert destroyed his life." I immediately called Mike and Sarah. If Robert was a serial con artist, this was much bigger than just my case. Update 3. The investigation deepens. Patricia wasn't lying. With her help and Sarah's investigation skills, we uncovered a pattern of fraud going back at least 7 years. Robert, Jessica, and Amanda had been running sophisticated long cons across multiple states, targeting successful single men through dating apps and professional networking events. Their method was always the same. Jessica would create profiles on high-end dating sites like Elite Singles and The League, specifically targeting men in tech, finance, or real estate, industries known for having young millionaires. She'd spend months building relationships, gathering financial information, and setting up the con. Then Robert would appear with some investment opportunity, always something that required exactly the amount of money Jessica had learned her target could afford. The scams evolved over time. In 2017-2018, it was a tech startup that supposedly needed angel investors. Robert played the role of an experienced entrepreneur who'd had previous exits and was now mentoring his daughter's boyfriend in launching an AI-powered logistics platform. They'd stolen over $300,000 from 3 different men in California and Texas. In 2019-2020, it was a real estate development scam. Robert presented himself as a commercial real estate developer working on luxury condos in Austin. He had fake architectural plans, fabricated city permits, even staged construction sites. They took another $400,000 from 2 victims in that scheme. The restaurant scam was their newest iteration, and they'd used it 4 times before targeting me. They'd refined it to perfection. The emotional story about Robert's father's diner, the professional business plans, even the fake supplier relationships. It was their most sophisticated con yet. But here's what made me sick. Jessica wasn't some innocent daughter being manipulated by her father. She was the architect of the psychological manipulation part of their operation. Patricia showed us Robert's notes, and it was clear that Jessica had developed detailed profiles of each victim's psychological vulnerabilities. For one victim in Phoenix, she'd identified that he had abandonment issues from a previous relationship, so she played up being different from other women and talked constantly about loyalty and commitment. For another in Seattle, she'd learned he was insecure about his social skills, so she made him feel like the funniest, smartest man she'd ever met. With me, she'd identified that I valued honesty and had been hurt by a cheating ex-girlfriend, so she positioned herself as refreshingly direct and trustworthy. She'd also noted that I was close to my family and wanted to settle down, so she played up the angle about building something together and creating a future. It was all documented in her handwriting, like a predator's hunting notes. The FBI got involved when Sarah's investigation revealed they'd crossed state lines multiple times and used wire transfers to move stolen money. Jessica and Amanda had been targeting victims in Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Texas, and California, while Robert handled the back end of creating fake businesses and documents. Agent Rebecca Torres was assigned to the case, and she was thrilled to finally have a lead on what she told us had been a pattern of similar crimes they'd been tracking. "We've been seeing these sophisticated romance investment scams for years," she explained during our first meeting. "But the victims are usually too embarrassed to come forward, and the criminals are always gone by the time anyone realizes what happened. You're the first victim who caught them in the act." But here's where it gets really interesting. They weren't just stealing money. They were also gathering personal information for identity theft and potentially blackmail. Robert had detailed files on all their victims, social security numbers, banking information, credit reports, even personal secrets and compromising information that Jessica had gathered during the relationships. "This is organized crime," Agent Torres told me during one of my interviews. "What you uncovered with those text messages broke open a multi-state fraud ring that we estimate has stolen over $2 million over 7 years." The investigation moved quickly. With Patricia's cooperation and access to Robert's files, they were able to identify at least 12 victims across 6 states. Some had lost their entire life savings. Others had been financially crippled for years. But the most disturbing discovery came when they dug into the case of Kenneth Walsh, a software executive in Salt Lake City who had supposedly committed suicide in 2021 after losing $180,000 to their real estate development scam. Update 4. The arrests. The arrests happened 3 weeks after our dinner. I got a call from Agent Torres at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. "We've got them," she said. "Jessica was picked up at her apartment an hour ago. Amanda was arrested at her marketing firm. We timed it for maximum impact. And Robert? We got him at his insurance office in front of all his coworkers and clients." Patricia had kept her word and cooperated fully with the investigation. She'd provided access to Robert's files, bank accounts, and computer systems. She'd also worn a wire during several conversations with Robert and Amanda, getting them to admit details about previous victims and their methods. The evidence was overwhelming. Besides my case, investigators found proof of at least 12 other victims over 7 years, with total documented losses exceeding $2.1 million. They'd recovered hard drives with detailed victim profiles, fake business documents going back years, and even audio recordings of Jessica practicing different personas for different targets. But the real bombshell came when they searched Robert's storage unit. Hidden in boxes behind old insurance files, they found detailed records of every con going back to 2017. Robert had kept everything: victim photos, financial records, even trophies from successful scams like expensive watches or jewelry they'd convinced victims to buy for Jessica. More disturbing were the psychological profiles Jessica had compiled. She'd studied each victim like a scientist studying lab rats. She'd documented their fears, their insecurities, their deepest desires. She'd noted which emotional triggers worked best on each personality type. For one victim, she'd written, "Desperately wants to be seen as successful and sophisticated. Mention how impressed you are by his wine knowledge and art collection. Make him feel cultured and worldly." For another, severe anxiety about aging and dying alone. Play up wanting children and a traditional family life. Make him feel like the mature, stable man you've been searching for. About me, she'd written, "Highly logical but craves emotional connection after previous betrayal. Present yourself as direct and honest, the opposite of his manipulative ex. Appeal to his protective instincts by seeming vulnerable but independent. His family orientation makes him a good target for the building something together angle. Reading that made me physically ill. Every moment of our relationship had been calculated. Every laugh, every tear, every spontaneous conversation. It was all performance art designed to extract money from me." Update 5. The trial and revelations. The trial was a complete vindication, but also a horror show of revelations about just how deep their criminal operation went. Robert pled guilty to wire fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft across multiple states. In exchange for cooperation, he received 12 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $2.1 million in restitution to all the victims. Of course, most of the money was long gone, spent on luxury cars, expensive vacations, gambling, and funding their increasingly elaborate cons. During his cooperation interviews, Robert revealed details that made the case even more chilling. The family had been planning to expand their operation internationally, targeting wealthy American expats in places like London and Dubai. They'd already started preliminary research on victims in those markets. Amanda took a plea deal and received 5 years, plus 7 years of probation. She lost her job at the marketing firm, her house, and her marriage. Her husband Chris filed for divorce the day she was arrested, claiming he'd had no idea about his wife's criminal activities. During Amanda's sentencing hearing, she tried to paint herself as a victim of her father's manipulation. But the prosecution had audio recordings of her bragging to friends about their family business and how easy it was to fleece lonely rich guys. Jessica went to trial, refusing all plea deals. Her defense strategy was to claim she was just a victim of her father's psychological manipulation, that she'd been groomed from childhood to participate in these scams, and that she'd genuinely fallen in love with me and tried to back out of the con. It didn't work. The jury heard recordings of her practicing different accents and personas for different victims. They saw her detailed psychological profiles and manipulation strategies. They listened to phone calls where she laughed about how pathetic her victims were and how easy they were to manipulate. But the most damning evidence was a recording Patricia had made just days before our dinner, where Jessica was coaching Amanda on how to handle potential future victims. "The key is making them feel special," Jessica said on the recording. "Every guy wants to be the hero in his own story. Make him feel like he's rescuing you, like he's the only one who really understands you. And always make it seem like investing in dad's business was their idea." She got 8 years in federal prison. But the real justice came from the other victims who testified during the sentencing hearings. 12 men took the stand to describe how Jessica and her family had destroyed their lives. Marcus Thompson, a software executive from Phoenix, lost his entire $400,000 retirement fund to their tech startup scam in 2018. He'd been forced to move in with his elderly parents and was still working at age 65 because he couldn't afford to retire. David Chen, a real estate developer from Austin, lost $250,000 to their development scam and had to sell his house to cover the resulting financial crisis. His marriage fell apart under the stress, and he declared bankruptcy. James Rodriguez, a finance director from Denver, lost $180,000 to an earlier version of the restaurant scam. He'd suffered a nervous breakdown and required months of therapy to recover from the emotional trauma. Each story was more heartbreaking than the last. These weren't just financial crimes. They were psychological terrorism designed to destroy people's ability to trust and love. When it was my turn to speak during Jessica's sentencing, I looked directly at her and said, "You didn't just try to steal my money. You tried to steal my ability to love and trust other people. You studied me like a lab rat, documented my vulnerabilities, and planned to exploit my emotions for profit. The difference between me and your other victims is that I was strong enough to fight back. Your other victims weren't so lucky." Jessica just stared at the floor the entire time. She never looked at me, never showed any remorse, never apologized to any of the victims who testified. The Kenneth Walsh investigation. 6 months after the sentencing, I got another call from Agent Torres. "David, there's something else. We've been investigating the Kenneth Walsh case, the man in Salt Lake City who supposedly committed suicide after losing money to their real estate scam." "What did you find?" "It wasn't suicide. Kenneth figured out the scam and confronted Robert. There was a physical altercation at a parking garage in downtown Salt Lake. Robert pushed Kenneth during the argument. Kenneth fell and hit his head on a concrete barrier. Robert panicked and made it look like suicide." My stomach dropped. Kenneth Walsh could have been me. If I hadn't found those text messages, if I just trusted Jessica and handed over the money, what would have happened when I eventually figured out the truth? "Amanda gave us details about the cover-up in exchange for a sentence reduction," Torres continued. "They moved the body, planted evidence of depression and financial ruin, even created fake debt documents to make it look like Kenneth had lost more money than he actually had." Robert was charged with second-degree murder and received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kenneth's family finally had closure after years of believing their son had killed himself over financial troubles. But the revelation haunted me. I'd been dating a family of criminals capable of murder, and I'd never suspected a thing. The ripple effects. The case made national news, partly because of the sophisticated nature of the scam, but mostly because of the murder revelation. I did several interviews with financial news networks about how to spot investment fraud and romance scams. The story resonated with people because it highlighted how vulnerable even successful, intelligent people can be to sophisticated manipulation. I received hundreds of emails from people who'd been victims of similar scams, thanking me for having the courage to fight back publicly. But there were also darker responses. Several people wrote to tell me about family members or friends who'd committed suicide after being victimized by romance scams. The psychological damage these criminals cause extends far beyond financial loss. I also heard from other potential victims who'd been targeted by the Richardson family, but had escaped before losing money. A tech entrepreneur in Seattle told me Jessica had contacted him on a dating app just 2 months before she started dating me, but he'd gotten suspicious when she kept steering conversations toward his recent IPO. A hedge fund manager in Chicago said Robert had pitched him an identical restaurant investment opportunity in 2020, but he'd walked away when the supposed lease documents didn't match public property records. These near misses showed just how systematic and widespread their operation had been. They were like serial killers, but instead of taking lives, they were destroying financial futures and emotional well-being. Personal recovery. It's been 18 months since that dinner at the Capitol Grill, and life has returned to a new normal. I never got the $200,000 they tried to steal. Partly because I never actually lost it, but mostly because there wasn't much left to recover after they'd spent years living large on other people's money. But I got something more valuable: the satisfaction of knowing I stopped them from hurting anyone else, and that Kenneth Walsh's family finally got justice for their son. Jessica sends me letters from federal prison sometimes. Long, rambling things about how she's changed, how she's found God, how she wants to make amends. The letters started out angry and defiant, blaming me for ruining her life and claiming I'd entrapped her somehow. But as the months passed and the reality of 8 years in federal prison set in, the tone changed to desperate pleading. In her most recent letter, she wrote, "I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I need you to know that some of what I felt for you was real. I didn't expect to actually start caring about you. That's why I hesitated those last few weeks. Part of me wanted to call the whole thing off. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I wanted you to know that you weren't just a mark to me. You were the first person who ever made me question whether what we were doing was wrong." I don't read these letters anymore. Mike handles all correspondence and files them away in case we need them for something legal. But the fact that she's still trying to manipulate me, even from prison, tells me everything I need to know about whether she's actually changed. Patricia and I occasionally exchange emails. She's rebuilt her life completely, moved to a different state, and started over under her maiden name. The divorce from Robert was finalized within 6 months. Apparently, discovering your husband is a murderer and con artist makes for pretty straightforward divorce proceedings. She still struggles with guilt about not seeing the signs earlier. "I keep going back through our entire marriage, looking for clues I missed," she wrote in one email. How do you live with someone for 22 years and not know they're a sociopath? What does that say about me? I told her what my therapist told me, that these people are professional manipulators, and their ability to deceive is their only real skill. The fact that we were fooled doesn't make us stupid. It makes them criminals. Dating again. Trust and verification. As for me, I'm dating again, though I'm definitely more careful than I used to be. I've learned to trust, but verify. I've learned that love doesn't make you stupid unless you let it, and that healthy skepticism isn't cynicism, it's wisdom. I met Rachel about 6 months after the trial ended. She's a software engineer at Google, has her own money and her own dreams, and most importantly, she was completely transparent about wanting to take things slow because she'd also been burned by someone in the past. Our first few dates were almost comically careful. We met in public places, split every check, and avoided talking about money or investments entirely. I may have been overly cautious. I definitely ran a background check on her before our third date, and I verified her employment and education credentials through mutual contacts. Rachel laughs about it now. "You investigated me more thoroughly than most employers," she says. I should have been offended, but honestly, it was kind of refreshing to date someone who took due diligence seriously. We've been together for 8 months now, and it's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. We're both successful professionals who don't need each other financially. We're building something real together, based on actual compatibility and genuine affection, not manipulation and hidden agendas. The difference between what I had with Rachel and what I thought I had with Jessica is night and day. With Jessica, every conversation felt like performance art. She was always saying exactly what she thought I wanted to hear. With Rachel, we argue sometimes, disagree on things, challenge each other. It's messy and real and infinitely more satisfying than Jessica's calculated perfection. Lessons learned. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled everything. Should I have just confronted Jessica privately instead of orchestrating that public takedown? Should I have tried to work things out somehow? My answer is always the same. Predators count on their victims being ashamed, being private, handling things quietly. They count on shame and embarrassment to keep their crimes hidden. I refuse to be ashamed of being targeted. I refuse to handle it quietly. And because I made it public, other victims came forward. A family of career criminals was finally stopped, and a murderer was brought to justice. That dinner was expensive, but it was the best $500 I ever spent. The experience taught me several important lessons. First, sophisticated criminals don't look like criminals. Robert seemed like a successful insurance agent and devoted father. Jessica seemed like a sweet art gallery worker looking for love. Amanda seemed like a normal marketing professional. They lived in nice houses, drove nice cars, and presented themselves as respectable middle-class people. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Second, the best defense against manipulation is knowledge. Once I understood their techniques, the artificial scarcity, the emotional manipulation, the false intimacy, I could see them coming from a mile away. I've since studied other romance and investment scams, and the patterns are always similar. Third, trust your instincts. I had moments during my relationship with Jessica where something felt slightly off, but I dismissed those feelings because everything else seemed so perfect. Now I know that perfection itself can be a red flag. Real relationships have friction, disagreements, and imperfections. Fourth, verify everything important. In business, I would never invest $200,000 without doing thorough due diligence, but I was ready to do exactly that because I trusted Jessica. Love shouldn't make you abandon common sense. The broader impact. The Richardson case has had implications beyond just the people directly involved. The FBI has used their methods to identify and investigate similar family-based fraud rings in other parts of the country. Agent Torres told me they've broken up at least 3 other operations using techniques they learned from studying how Robert's family operated. The case has also been used in training programs for financial advisors, bank employees, and law enforcement officers who deal with fraud cases. The sophisticated nature of their psychological manipulation techniques has become a case study in how modern con artists operate. Several universities have reached out to me about speaking to their business and psychology students about the case. I've done a few guest lectures focusing on the intersection of psychology and financial crime. It's fascinating and disturbing to see how classic psychological manipulation techniques can be weaponized for financial gain. The dating app companies have also made some changes based on our case. Both Elite Singles and The League now have better verification processes and monitoring systems designed to catch users who are systematically targeting wealthy individuals. It won't stop all romance scams, but it should make them harder to execute at scale. Final revelations. Just last month, I received a call that brought the story full circle in a way I never expected. Agent Torres called to tell me that Jessica had been attacked in federal prison. Apparently, she tried to run a smaller-scale con on another inmate, something about helping her appeal her conviction in exchange for money from the woman's family. The other inmate was a former gang member serving time for assault, and she didn't take kindly to being manipulated. Jessica's in the prison hospital with a broken nose and 3 cracked ribs, Torres told me. The other woman told the guards that Jessica tried to play her like she was some kind of easy mark. Apparently, word had gotten around the prison about what Jessica was in for, and a lot of the other inmates had lost family members or friends to romance scams. I felt a complicated mix of emotions hearing that news. I didn't wish physical violence on Jessica, but there was a certain poetic justice to her finally facing consequences from someone she couldn't manipulate or charm her way out of. The interesting thing, Torres continued, is that Jessica has been trying to run smaller cons on other inmates and their families since she arrived at the facility. She convinced one woman to have her family send money for legal fees that Jessica claimed could help with her appeal. She talked another inmate into having her boyfriend on the outside invest in a business opportunity Jessica's cousin was supposedly running. Even in federal prison, Jessica was still trying to scam people. It confirmed what I'd suspected all along. She wasn't a victim of her father's influence or a good person who'd made bad choices. She was a predator, and predation was her natural state. The attack apparently convinced Jessica to finally stop trying to manipulate people, at least in prison. But according to Torres, she's already talking about her plans for when she gets out. How she's going to write a book about her experiences, maybe start a consulting business, helping people spot romance scams. She's already planning her next con, Torres said. She just wants to make it legal this time. A new chapter. Despite everything, I consider myself lucky. I caught them before they could complete their theft. I was strong enough financially and emotionally to fight back. I had friends and resources who could help me get justice. Most victims of these scams aren't so fortunate. Rachel and I are talking about moving in together. She's met my parents, and they love her. My dad especially appreciates that she can hold her own in conversations about business and technology. More importantly, she's met them as herself, not as a character created to manipulate me. We've had the money conversation, of course. We're both successful enough that neither of us needs the other financially, which eliminates a major source of potential manipulation. We've talked about how we'd handle joint expenses, investments, and financial planning if we do decide to build a life together. It's refreshingly boring and practical, exactly the opposite of Jessica's manufactured drama and artificial urgency. I still keep the screenshots from Jessica's phone in a secure folder, along with all the fake business documents and legal papers from the case. Not because I need them anymore, but as a reminder of how sophisticated modern criminals can be. They're my insurance policy against ever being that naive again. Sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about Kenneth Walsh. I wonder what his last moments were like. Did he realize he'd been conned? Was he angry? Or just heartbroken? Did he know that Robert was going to kill him? Or did he think he was just confronting a business partner who'd betrayed him? Kenneth was just 2 years older than me. He had a similar background. Tech entrepreneur, successful but still looking for someone to share his life with. In another timeline, it could have been me in that parking garage in Salt Lake City. That thought used to give me nightmares. Now it just makes me grateful that I found those text messages, Grateful that I had friends who could help me get justice. Grateful that I was suspicious enough to verify what Jessica was telling me. And grateful that Kenneth's family finally knows the truth about what happened to their son. The last word. 3 years later, the Richardson family is exactly where they deserve to be. Robert will die in federal prison. Jessica won't be released until she's in her mid-30s, and she'll carry a federal fraud conviction for the rest of her life. Amanda is trying to rebuild her life, but the conviction has made it almost impossible for her to find work in her field. Patricia has found peace in a new life, far from the wreckage of her old one. She volunteers at a victim advocacy center and has become an expert on helping people recover from financial fraud. She told me recently that helping other victims has been therapeutic for her own recovery. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever have. The experience taught me things about myself that I never would have learned otherwise. I'm stronger than I thought I was. I'm more resilient than I gave myself credit for. And I'm capable of the kind of cold, calculated strategy that I never knew I possessed. Rachel and I got engaged last month. She said yes immediately when I proposed, then laughed and said, "I assume you've already run a credit check on me and verified that I'm not part of some elaborate long con?" I had, of course. But I'd also learned to love her for who she really is, not for some character she was playing. The difference is everything. We're planning a small wedding, just family and close friends. Mike will be my best man, and Sarah and Tom will be in the wedding party. They were there for the worst day of my romantic life. They deserve to be there for the best one too. Jessica will still be in federal prison when we get married. She'll miss the whole thing, which seems appropriate somehow. The fake relationship she created to steal from me will be just a memory while I'm celebrating a real relationship built on trust and honesty. Sometimes people ask me if I ever wonder what would have happened if I'd never seen those text messages. Would Jessica have gone through with the scam? Would she have taken the money and disappeared? Or would her feelings for me have changed her mind? I used to wonder about that too. But then I remember Kenneth Walsh, and I remember the detailed psychological profiles Jessica kept on all her victims, and I remember that even in prison, she's still trying to con people. Jessica Richardson is a predator. Predators don't change their nature just because they start to like their prey. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's making sure the predators can never hurt anyone else again. And sometimes it's simply living well while they rot in the cages they built for themselves. That dinner at the Capitol Grill cost me $500 and 8 months of my life. But it saved me $200,000. Probably saved my life. And helped bring justice for Kenneth Walsh and 11 other victims. Best investment I ever made. Final update. 5 years later, I'm writing this final update on the 5-year anniversary of that dinner. Rachel and I have been married for 2 years now. We bought a house together, a real one, not part of some elaborate scam, and we're expecting our first child in 3 months. Jessica was released from federal prison 8 months ago. She served her full sentence without parole because of disciplinary problems. Apparently, she never did stop trying to manipulate other inmates and guards. She's required to register as a financial offender and can't work in any position involving access to other people's money. I know this because she violated the restraining order 3 weeks after her release by sending me a letter through a third party. The letter was pathetic. More manipulation disguised as remorse, asking for my forgiveness, and wondering if we could find closure together. I turned the letter over to my lawyer and the police. She was arrested for violating the restraining order and is now back in jail awaiting trial for that violation, plus new charges for attempting to run an online romance scam from her halfway house. Some people never learn. Some people can't be saved or redeemed. Some people are just broken in ways that make them dangerous to everyone around them. But here's the thing I've learned. Their brokenness doesn't have to break you. Their sickness doesn't have to make you sick. You can be smart without being cynical. You can be cautious without being paranoid. You can learn to trust again without being naive. Rachel is everything Jessica pretended to be. Honest, genuine, supportive, and real. Our relationship has the kind of natural ups and downs that Jessica worked so hard to fake. We disagree sometimes. We challenge each other. We grow together. It's imperfect and human and infinitely more valuable than Jessica's manufactured perfection. Kenneth Walsh's family sent us a birth announcement when we shared the news about the baby. His parents said they wanted our child to know that Kenneth's story helped protect other people and that some good came from their terrible loss. They're remarkable people who've turned their tragedy into purpose by advocating for other fraud victims. Robert died in federal prison 2 months ago. Heart attack, according to the news reports. He was 67. I felt nothing when I heard the news. Not satisfaction, not sadness, just nothing. He'd become irrelevant to my life the moment he was convicted. Amanda has been arrested twice since her release for attempting to run smaller-scale scams. She apparently learned nothing from her prison time and is headed back for a longer sentence. The whole family was rotten to the core. As for me, I'm exactly where I want to be. Married to someone who loves me for who I really am. Building a real family based on truth and trust. Running a successful business that helps people instead of hurting them. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well while the people who tried to destroy you destroy themselves. Jessica thought she was the hunter and I was the prey. She thought she was playing chess while I didn't even know there was a board. She was wrong about all of it. In the end, I wasn't the mark. She was. And the con I pulled on her was so perfect, so complete, that she's still paying for it 5 years later and will be for the rest of her life. Game over. I won.